Grave Diggers, where we analyze, dissect, and conjecture wildly about Geek and Sundry's actual play show, Titansgrave, The Ashes of Valkana. I'm one of your co-hosts, Eric, and this is Chris and Shannon.
Hello. I'm looking a little bit different apparently today. I'm coming to you from an undisclosed location in Las Vegas. I'm at an actual real-life work convention. So I have audio, but apparently I don't have video, which actually probably is better. We might actually have more people tuning in so they don't have to see my face. But we'll see.
So we'll go ahead and get started with an overall recap of Episode 3, in which I like to say that this is an RP mostly episode where they did a ton of character development.
Yeah, and it had, for me, there was there was a definite mood change in this particular episode. I felt it was, the first two episodes, they had a very obvious comic bend to them, and everybody was having a good time, and it was, all kind of smiles and a little bit of jokes and things like that. But this one, things got a little bit more serious. I felt there was a bit more. At least Will was attempting to set a more serious tone, and the players were slowly but surely following him along.
Right, and I think that in a way it kind of hammered home that this is supposed to be fun, but he's also trying to tell a story that there's serious parts to this story, and he wants to touch on that, and not everything's going to be a big joke. Sure, there's going to be lighthearted antics or something here and there where it's going to make everybody laugh, but he wants to also put a little bit of drama into it. And if everything's a goof, then there's not going to be, they're not going to have any drama to draw on and to make those tense moments. And there were quite a few, like, even if it was minor, tense moments in this episode where the players just kind of sat back and went, "Oh, wait a minute. What's really going on here?" I think the best instance of that was when Slethik was in the he was in I can't remember what it was. It was he was in the orc bar.
He was in the orc bar.
Yes.
Yeah. So and he was. I'm getting reverb.
I mean, yeah, I hear it too.
Try it now. We should be good.
Okay, and he was in the orc bar, and he was talking to the bartender, and when the bartender was saying, "Well, why do you have scales?" And at first he was just like, "Haha," but then Will really just kept hammering that home, and I think Yuri, the player, was like, "Wait a minute, something's wrong here. Something's not right." And that's when he took his thing and walked off, and I think
always
that kind of
always picking on poor Yuri.
Well, and it wasn't just that scene. It was the one just prior to that with what's her name?
Lemley.
Yes, thank you, Lemley. That scene with that she had as well was also it was kind of intense. There was some serious stuff going on in there, and it was interesting to kind of watch that scene, but then also, just like we had just discussed, watch their reactions to that. They suddenly began to realize this is a larger world that we're in, and it's not all fun and games anymore. There's something serious that's going on, and that may be happening.
I think it was just such a change in setting, because before they were surrounded by friends, or like friendlies at least. They were all people who they had gotten in good with through one way or another, versus now they're in a city of strangers. Like, they have one name, and even that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I think in this episode, Will definitely started adding more of the story. Like before, he was still running it, but he wasn't getting to the nitty-gritty yet. It was all just set up stuff, and so I feel like in this episode he kind of started to actually hint at the story, or not even hint at, but start the story he set out to tell.
Yeah, and there were, I don't know if there's a lot of maybe the meta plot or the overarching story or anything like that, but he definitely set a mood, and that's something that is quite important when you're talking about a role-playing game where you want it to be taken seriously, and he did set that mood. In his narrative, he was really he was on point when it came to what he wanted to convey, how this city looks. He in very few words, he hit the nail right on the head, and gave that almost visceral feeling of this is what this city is all about. It's a ruined city. It's a city built on another ruined city, and there's still technology. The black domes with the cameras in them, setting up the whole 1984 you're always being watched kind of thing, and that also in itself sets a mood, especially with because modern people can understand this. Viewers, audience can understand this with aspects of freedom and all that other stuff. So. Even though it's a fictitious world, he's putting some of these real-world anxieties, angst, fear into this, and he doesn't have to go into minute detail about it because people already understand it. So I think he's utilizing that very well and playing on things that the players may already know. It's a shortcut, and it's been done in Pulp Fiction forever. So it's just it's a good storytelling technique to speed things along. Nobody wants to hear about the 14 things they have on their breakfast tray, as a lot of your fantasy fiction writers love to do. He cut right to the point. This is what you see, bang, 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 and automatically gives you that feeling of, ooh, I gotta watch what I do. And consequently, he set that up. It was almost like a setup and a punchline, because he set that all up. They did what they did, and at the very end, it's like, bang, now you're on screen. Everybody sees your face. All the usual gamer crap that you did is now come back to haunt you.
It's also a good GM tool to do that sort of thing as well, because it reminds the players, hey, your actions have consequences, which a lot of players, you don't really forget, you just don't take that into account because, hey, we're playing a game and it's all fun and we can do whatever we want, whenever it's like, no, like, you're still in a world, you're in a setting, and your actions have consequences. So here's what happened.
Yeah, I agree with both those points, and it also served in the end when that all started to happen to them, and their faces were on the screens and everything. It helped to serve a double purpose, which I think is important to this show, as was kind of discussed before. The fact that this is a short run season, and so to a certain extent, the game master, Will in this case, he's got to move the story along so they can finish everything they need to finish within this this 10-episode arc, and so it served a good secondary purpose of doing just that. It absolutely illustrated consequences to your actions, and it moved the story along because they immediately at the end of that episode knew exactly what they're going to be doing at the beginning of the next episode, and the story now has thus been moved forward, which is good, and it's even outside of the context of the show, as it is a good GM technique to use every now and again when your players might be stuck, or when you need to move the story or the action forward. And so I appreciated seeing that. The other thing I really kind of appreciated was I got a very good sense in this episode that the players and the characters were starting to become a bit more cohesive as a party. There was some of the things that they were doing as characters and interacting was such stuff that you see around the table when players, as a group with their characters, start to come together. Some of the looks on some of the faces when the party was split up, when Limley took off at the accident scene, and two of them still stayed there, and there was some question. They're like, oh my gosh, why are they leaving? We should be staying helping these people, and so that's good. That's showing that they're, one, getting into their characters, and two, developing a few maybe possible inter-character conflicts, which are just good for role play down the line.
Right. I think that I'm glad you brought that up, because there was something about that whole scene with the caravan, or the people that were in the burning vehicles and whatnot, the saving of the injured, and something happened in that little scene that hit me, and I was like, wow, that's, looking at how that transpired. I was struck by the way Ankia was very jaded about, oh, I've seen death before. It means nothing to me. And I don't know if it's just a coincidence, or if it was, the way that Ankia's player plays the character, or if it's more of it struck me as a jaded, experienced gamer reaction. I don't care about them. What's in there? I want to loot their bodies. I want to see what's in their packs. I want to see what's in their trucks. I don't care about this guy who's dying behind the wheel. He means nothing to me. But consequently, when it was Ankia's stuff, meaning Jeremy the robot, there was total compassion. Oh, we need to find Jeremy. That's that's an important thing. So a lot in role-playing games, a lot of times life is cheap, and the lives of NPCs is even cheaper. And I think that was like a microcosm of that. The player was an experienced player. He didn't care about some, burning vehicle and some dwarf laying on the ground that needed to be pulled to freedom. He wanted some stuff, and so, and then you had Lemley, who kind of went along with that and was, wanting to look at stuff, but, pulled one guy free, but the others were more interested in let's try and save the people. Mm-hmm. And I think that to me, that was a defining moment for Ankia in my eyes. Now Ankia's got to redeem herself in my eyes, because right now I don't care about Ankia. It's like if I'm come upon a scene, and I can understand characters, maybe her motivation had nothing to do with saving innocent people, and that's fine. But then to flip it and say, well, my stuff is in danger, you have to care about that. So I think that was kind of a telling moment for me, and I'm interested to see if Ankia can rise above that, and maybe that was just a hiccup going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that there's and I think that's, from a viewer's perspective, that's a good thing, because you clearly have an opinion about what Ankia did or didn't do, and you want to see some resolution with that, and and you clearly are not the only one like that, and it wouldn't surprise me if the rest of some of them at least around the table, or at least either felt the same way, or if Will was cataloging that as a GM in his head to use at some point down the road as either a particular plot device or a character development device as well. I was also happy to see the dwarf return. I was kind of a little disappointed in how that whole thing went in the past. In the previous episode, I felt there wasn't enough being done with that, and now to see him show up in the town there, I thought to myself, oh, good, we're going to get a little bit more resolution out of this. And granted, again, I think it got a little bit of a short shrift, but clearly it looks like he's going to at least be some sort of reoccurring nemesis until something is sorted out with him.
Yeah, I actually thought that was funny because I was like, oh, that was one of their biggest gripes about the last episode, and looky here, there's more dwarf, one-eyed dwarf.
Yeah, he was kind of like the cabbage dealer was like the nail in the coffin. Turns around, boom, she doesn't get to run away. There's the cabbage dealer that she obviously knocked over his stuff and didn't care about, and it came back to haunt her. And then turns around again, and the second nail in the coffin was the one-eyed dwarf.
Which, I love the cabbage dealer because that's actually a reference to the show Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I don't know, the majority of the episodes. I don't think it's every single episode, but in the majority of the episodes, there's a guy with a cart full of cabbages, and his cabbage cart gets destroyed, and then he goes, "My cabbages!" And so, she definitely played it off like it was just a reference to that, as most people would, and so I like that he brought it back. And he's like...
That's interesting. That's interesting. I didn't notice that because here's my geek confession. I've never watched Avatar: The Last Airbender.
You should. It's great.
I know that's what everybody says. Even my kids have watched it, and they said, "Dad, you should watch this. It's great." Yep, it's on the list. But see that. But that was the other thing too that I think I did appreciate about this episode is that as a group of players, they're developing some of their own internal things that gamers do. You just mentioned one right there that clearly I was unaware of, but you caught it because you knew of that. But then there was a when they were going to go shopping, it was very, very quick, but I really appreciated it. There was a reference to the Spatula City line from UHF, which of course is a movie near and dear to my heart, and I caught that reference. It was very, very quick, very, very fleeting, but to me that's indicative of what groups do like that when they get together. People they'll quote random movie lines. We all do it. Whether it's Holy Grail or Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein or pick whatever geek movie you want, it does happen. And to see that kind of stuff happen like it is now, that's a very positive sign of a healthy group. And so I don't want to dwell on that forever, but I appreciated the fact that references like that are now starting to occur and being made, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that with those kind of references and things like that, it does kind of give a nice little slice of what a game group does, because every game group does it. And so, moving on though to another point, looking at the role playing of the game up close, I think that by far the best role playing, in my opinion, the very best role playing done on that episode was the "Why do you have scales" moment, where you could actually see in Yuri's eyes, he was just like, "Uh-oh, something's not right here," and he picked up on it pretty quick, and that just look on his face, and he was like, backing away slowly, that kind of thing. And then my other favorite RP moment was when Kiliel went into the weapon dealer, and the weapon dealer was like Dennis Hopper with the used quiver. That was quite comical, and I really enjoyed that because that's also the kind of thing that game masters and players do, is they'll throw in those references like you said, and that was another reference that I don't know if a lot of people, I mean the players picked it up, so I would imagine a lot of the audience would pick that up too. But whenever you can kind of creep people out, you've always got my vote.
Yeah, well, and actually the whole thing, "Why do you have scales?" that was one of my two favorite RP moments. The other one being Lemley's scene just prior to that, when she was having her amulet looked at, and in the way in which the shopkeep was just saying, "No charge, no charge," and he was slowly backing away, and he had clear fear in his eyes, and they gave a nice little recap as to why he probably would do that. Of course, she had no idea but she became suspicious, and the role-playing in that scene was good. But the problem I had with the episode, though, in this case, was aside from those two, or even if we throw in the quiver moment, 3 moments, from my perspective, that was about it. There wasn't a lot of other role-playing around it. And in fact, I know we're not talking about rules yet, but that was where I got a little ticked off about. I think there was too much reliance on skill checks and rules getting in the way of the flow of the thing. There was some perception-related checks and other things that I felt, from a game master standpoint, were unnecessary to move the action forward. And I don't know if they were there just to be illustrative of the rules, although I doubt that, just because of the fact that we had already kind of seen how checks like this work in the past. But I felt it was unnecessary. It wasn't necessary to the action. There was just a bit too many tests that got in the way a little bit of the story moving forward. Certainly they had to have some, and there was some very necessary ones, but I felt that there was almost a little bit too much dice rolling for what did come across as what should have been a more RP-themed episode.
I know it can also, they had a lot of communication checks and stuff like that, and I feel like that can kind of benefit the player. It takes some of the stress out of it for the player, because you can come up and you're like, I know what I want to do. I don't know how I want to do it, but I know that I want to do this really cool thing. Here, let me roll. As experienced players, a lot of times we'll say, hey, can I roll this? Or, and it just kind of alleviates some of that stress. It's like, okay, I don't have to come up with the perfect argument for this. Instead, I can roll communication. And so it could have been some of that. I don't know what happened between day 1 of shooting and day 2. And it could have been more like, oh, this made me nervous. I didn't really know what to do, or something like that, which I kind of doubt, because they're all.
But see, I don't know. I mean, I can see where you're coming from, but I don't know. I guess I'm gonna completely disagree with you, just because yes, a role like that certainly can alleviate any player nervousness. Is like, I don't really know what to do, so let me roll the dice and then you help me get through this. But as a GM, you don't need to rely on the dice all the time to do that. You can say, he could, as a GM, you could easily say, what is it exactly that you want to try to accomplish? And then between the two of you just talking, you can kind of work something out. And if you do then at that point want to default to a skill roll, great. But sometimes it can be a crutch, I think, in a certain sense, and it can negatively affect play, and then you end up relying on it a bit too much. I don't know. It's just that I know that sounds very curmudgeonly, I guess, of me to say that, but in a certain sense. But sometimes it can get in the way when it's unimportant is also kind of the wrong word to use, I guess, too, because every encounter can be important. But when it's not as vital as an encounter as other ones, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that one of the philosophies that a lot of game masters use is, if it doesn't move the story along, if you have to get through that door, then why make a roll? So yeah, I mean, if it's something if it's important to move the story along, then if they fail the roll and they're going to be sitting there and doing something, trying to get through that door for the next 3 hours, that's not very exciting. On the other hand, and I think kind of as a counterpoint to what you're saying, is sometimes if you open it up too much and you let the players dictate the flow of the action, or even the plot, Will does a good job about letting the players kind of take the reins a little bit, but sometimes you don't want them to succeed in everything, because then it's not as exciting. Or maybe what you're trying to do is not furthering the story. Going to a bucket dealer is a prime example of that, and Will was like, shut the door, we're closed, I'm not going there. And that was a clear sign of we don't need this. Doesn't get us anywhere. So I think sometimes game masters can use the rules too much, and sometimes, and I think in this case, this is what the way I took it was that Will was kind of on the fence. He didn't care if it went one way or the other. So let's make it a skill roll and let the dice be the dick, and that way I don't have to be, So that way, if you fail it, it's on you. It's not me telling you no. So
I feel like a lot of it also was deciding the degree of information. Hey, do I want them to know everything about this, or do I just want them to know partial information? Which, is a tactic that often comes up. Some games have it built into the system even. It's like, okay, do they... Sorry, my cat just jumped up in my face. What do they need to know, and how far do they need to go to get it? And sometimes the dice help you realize that as well.
Yeah, no, and I totally. I mean, I do see what you're saying. I do agree with that. Although I'd like what you said, Eric, about letting the dice be the dick. So then you can essentially defer blame if the dice aren't kind. You say, hey, it's not my fault. You can totally. It's plausible deniability in a certain sense.
Right, but I don't know. I think when it comes, we kind of segue into rules, but and dice rolling, but. I don't think there were any real important dice rolls in this, and I also don't think that any new rules, twists, or advanced rules were used, as far as I could remember from the episode.
It didn't seem that way to me either. It seemed like it was stuff that we'd seen before. The only thing really different that we saw was, and maybe you're going there, was we got to see the advancements. What happens to the characters when they advance and how they chose things.
Right.
Well, going back to the different roles they had done, I think it may have been more for like newer players, because as people who have been playing for some time, we know what a perception check is, and we know that instead of role playing, you can roll a communication roll, but new players don't necessarily know that, and I don't think they had done either of those things. I think they might have done perception, but I don't think they had done a communication roll before, and so it also kind of did showcase that. Apparently, Chris, I'm going to keep on arguing with you about this point.
You know what, though? That's a good thing. I don't think we should completely agree on this, because that's what makes this kind of stuff interesting. In that sense, and his style and approach is a little bit different than what I would use. Not much, but it is a little bit different. And that's Eric said at the beginning of the show, we dissect and scrutinize, and that's and I think talking about how he as a game master conducts his game and the reactions he gets from his players because of the way that he's doing it, as well as their level of investment because of the way he's doing it. That's as gamers, that matters to us. I like watching his style, comparing it to what I would do, and would I do that in that similar situation? Yes, no, but that's a good thing, and I like hearing your perspective on that, because you're more of a player, and it's a nice reminder for me.
Yeah. And not only that, like, whenever I first started, I had a really tough time, like, actually doing the role-playing, so knowing that I can just make a roll versus coming up with stuff to say, like, that always really helped me, and I guess that's probably why I'm defending it more.
I think that sometimes as experienced gamers, you sometimes forget that sometimes not everybody is an orator, and can spout off all the things that they want to say, and some people are a little socially awkward, or just not uncomfortable, and so I think that sometimes using rules like that, it does help. Moving forward, though, this is also, like you said, talking about leveling up. They got to level up to level 3. They got to pick some advancements. That was nice. I liked the way that Will kind of did a little bitty narrative of, this is it fit with your character, how you're portraying your character. So that's good. The other thing that it wasn't necessarily a rules thing, but this is the first time you got to see what money was used for and the value of things, and that was kind of part of my beef with. I'm going to hammer on Anki a little bit more. We've got this rare brew of beer, and I want this exorbitant amount of money from this dealer. Okay, well, I'll give you these 3 stacks of more gold than you have in your pocket. Oh no, I want this massive amount. Okay, now you get nothing. But
that was a very good use of the dice, I think, to allow that, how that all works together to be kind of showcased. And I agree with you. This is still a little bit of a beef that I have with the show. I'm not getting a sense of scale of the economy and what things are actually worth. And even though they were in an antiques, like the only thing I could really wrap my mind around was how much do arrows cost? How much does a quiver cost for arrow? Because that's an item, a common item that I can identify with. But if you're in an antique store or an artifact store where they're looking at strange and unusual items, well, then there is no frame of reference for cost or scale.
Well, I think also how the players reacted whenever we found out that however you say his name, that he just had 50 gold that he was willing to spend on that. I think that also kind of, it showed how much money they had, which, aside from him, it sounds like it's not much.
Yeah, right. And that's... Go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to say, I think moving forward, they're gonna value the gold, and they're going to be able to figure out what things cost. I think that maybe to defend Anki a little bit, there up until that point, really there wasn't a whole lot of what things cost. So how much do you want to sell this rare beer for? Well, rare beer, sell it for thousands. And when you're talking about no frame of reference of what things cost, people are going to shoot for the moon anyway.
Right, and you're right, and they really haven't had. I mean, they have, as players, they've had no reference to see what things cost. Conversely, and it seems like they're being kind of given portions of the rules in a similar manner to what we are. So they may not have had even a chance to even look to see what certain things might cost. We always, as when we sit down as players, we can look in the player's handbook to see, how much does this particular item of equipment cost, and so it allows you to build a frame of reference. Clearly, they don't have a similar document to look at, so it's hard to blame them too much for that kind of stuff because, maybe Grandma's Sweat Stout is worth 8,000. Who knows? Clearly we've learned that it's not, but they don't know, so they have to start somewhere. Although, admittedly, 8,000 was probably a bit high. I've never drank Grandma's Sweat, so it may be spectacular beer, but I guess we'll never know.
Right. Well, before we wrap up this episode, I did want to bring up one thing that was a monumental disappointment for me, and that was the fact that the orb was an elaborate treasure chest. That was such a letdown for me because I was thinking this was some mysterious thing that's going to unlock some sort of could have unlocked some sort of a vault of the ancients, or could have been the weapon of or an egg of some ancient creature or something like that, and all it really turned out to be was just, like I said, an elaborate treasure chest that they've been carrying around to give them some boosts. So I think that was a wasted opportunity.
As I was writing my notes, because we write our notes as we watch the episode, and I had even wrote because they had that little moment in the beginning wherever Will mentions the orb, and then some of the players are like, what orb? Oh yeah, the orb. And so I had even written, I like that the players had forgotten about their MacGuffin, and then it's like, oh wait, no, it's just like it stops being important after this.
That's true. I had up to this point figured that the orb was indeed going to be something that was very, very plot centric, and that it's going to reveal something major and give them the direction that they need to go, because they have essentially just wandered for these first 3 episodes, and that clearly that's not what that is. It's like you said, it was an elaborate treasure chest. It gave them some boosts, which certainly may have usage down the line, but it could have been something that could have pushed the story in a certain direction, but it's not. Whoever this person was who did the 5 gold in a party at the end of the episode, that's where the story is now going to go. It is a little bit disappointing in a certain sense, but I don't know. I guess my reaction to it was, I guess, a little bit more neutral, than how you felt, Eric. But I can totally see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, you have plot hooks and you have plot, things that move the story along. To me, that let down. It was almost like he pooched it, and I was like, "Oh, really?" I mean, I can understand maybe a little bit of misdirection, but in your opening credits, you talk about this orb, and so now you don't even need it in the opening credits unless it has a further meaning. And that,
well, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Up until this point, that was pretty much the only direction they had. They had at the very beginning been told they got this orb and they got this name, and that's where they were going, and they just made a pit stop, which ended up having a side quest, but then they were back to this same quest, and that's all they really had to go on. So that was their direction up until that point. So taking that away, and it's like, oh, okay, so it's not that big of a deal. Kind of, leaves you wanting.
Right. Well, and of course, leaving them on a cliffhanger, that makes you want to see what happens next week. They're obviously going to have to face the political structure now, and I think that was interesting that he introduced that, the political structure. So, does anybody have any final thoughts before we wrap this episode?
No, I do agree with what you just said. I think that as far as ending a game session, cliffhangers, things like that, outside of the fact that there's viewers, people watching the show to get them to come back, to keep your players invested in the game that they're playing, that was perfect. I enjoyed that tremendously. I thought that was a good way to do it.
The other guy who GMs for our group, besides Eric, he almost always tries to leave it on a cliffhanger. He loves it, and so it's been a GM tactic I've been very used to, and it's like, yeah, that's how you end a game.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap on this episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week in the Ashes.
Later.